My father stood up at Thanksgiving dinner, cleared his throat, and announced they'd decided to give my inheritance to my brother instead. $250,000 that was supposed to be split equally between us. All going to him now because he needed help with his bills after his latest business venture collapsed. My mother nodded along, said they knew I'd understand since I was doing fine on my own. I smiled, told them family comes first, and went back to eating my turkey. They had absolutely no idea what I'd been building in secret for the past decade, or how spectacularly this decision was about to backfire on all of them. Here's what you need to know. I'm 34, my brother Kyle is 37. Growing up, Kyle was the golden child who could do no wrong. I was the responsible one who never needed help. Kyle got money for every failed scheme, every bad decision, every time he messed up. I got praise for being independent. Guess which one actually helps you survive? My parents ran a small but successful manufacturing business, sold it 5 years ago for decent money. The plan was always that Kyle and I would each get half when they passed. That was the promise since we were kids. But Kyle's been through 3 failed businesses, 2 divorces, and more bad investments than I can count. He always landed on my parents' doorstep with his hand out. Meanwhile, I'd been working in tech since college, living below my means, investing everything I could. I'd learned early that I couldn't count on family money, so I built my own path. My parents never knew the details of my finances. I let them think I was doing okay, but nothing special. That assumption was about to cost them everything. But what happened next made my blood run cold. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside. She said they'd made this decision because Kyle was struggling, and I wasn't. She actually said those words. I wasn't struggling, so I didn't need help. She asked if I was upset. I told her I understood, that Kyle needed it more. She hugged me, relieved. She thought I'd actually accepted this without a fight. Dad was less subtle. He said they'd already transferred the money, that it was done. He wanted to make sure I wouldn't cause problems about it later. I promised I wouldn't contest anything. He seemed surprised by how easy I was being about it. Probably expected me to argue or cry or make a scene. Instead, I just smiled and changed the subject. That's when everything changed. I went home that night and called my financial advisor. At 34, I'd built a portfolio worth just over $900,000. Tech job paid well, I'd been aggressive with investments, bought rental properties young, made smart moves. My parents had no clue. They thought I was living paycheck to paycheck in my modest apartment, which I kept specifically to maintain that impression. My advisor and I had actually planned for this scenario. Not this exactly, but the possibility that my parents would choose Kyle over me when it mattered. We'd structured everything so I didn't need their money. Not $1 of it. Their inheritance was never part of my financial plan because I never trusted it would actually materialize. Kyle, on the other hand, had been counting on that money his whole life. He'd built nothing, saved nothing, planned for nothing except eventually inheriting from Mom and Dad. And now he had his share plus mine, and my parents felt like heroes for helping their struggling son. Quick thing, if you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. We post family revenge stories daily, and trust me, some are even crazier than this. Alright, back to the story. 3 months after Thanksgiving, I got a call from Mom. Kyle had blown through $100,000 already. Bad investments, paying off debts, buying a new truck he didn't need. She sounded worried, but not panicked yet. She asked if I could talk to him, give him some advice about money management. I said I'd try, knowing it wouldn't matter. Kyle had never listened to me about anything. I met Kyle for coffee. He showed up in his new truck, wearing expensive clothes, talking about his latest business idea. Some cryptocurrency scheme that was definitely going to make him rich this time. I asked how much of the inheritance he'd already spent. He laughed, said money wasn't an issue anymore. He had plenty. I didn't argue. Just let him talk, knowing exactly how this would end. For months after that, Mom called crying. Kyle had lost everything. Some investment scam, some deal that went bad, some expenses that spiraled. The entire $250,000 was gone. Plus, he'd taken out loans using the expectation of future inheritance as collateral. He owed people money he couldn't pay. And now my parents were using their retirement savings to bail him out again. Want to know the best part? They asked if I could help. Mom said they knew it wasn't fair to ask, but family helps family. Could I loan them $50,000 to help cover Kyle's debts? They'd pay me back when they could. I asked how much of their retirement was left. She said about $30,000 after they paid off Kyle's immediate debts. They were 70 years old with $30,000. I told them I needed to think about it. Mom begged. Dad got on the phone, his pride clearly shattered, and said they'd made a mistake choosing Kyle, that they should have trusted me more, that they were sorry. I said I'd call them back in a few days. I didn't. Little did they know I had one more card to play. 2 weeks later, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. They looked terrible, stressed, aged, desperate. They asked again about the loan. Said Kyle was being threatened by some of the people he owed, that they didn't know what else to do. They'd mortgaged their house, sold Mom's jewelry, done everything they could think of. I invited them in, made coffee, sat them down, and then I told them the truth. I explained my entire financial situation, the investments, the properties, the portfolio. Showed them actual numbers on my laptop. Watched their faces as they realized their daughter, who they thought was barely getting by, was actually approaching millionaire status. Dad asked why I'd never told them. I said because they never asked. They'd assumed I was struggling because I lived modestly and didn't show off. They'd built their entire understanding of my life on assumptions, and then used those assumptions to justify giving everything to Kyle. 3 days later, karma came knocking harder than I expected. Mom asked if I'd help them now that I knew I could afford it. I said no. She started crying, asked how I could abandon them like this. I reminded her that they'd abandoned me first, that they'd chosen Kyle over me not once, but repeatedly my entire life, that this inheritance decision was just the final, most blatant example of a pattern that had been going on for decades. Dad got angry, said I was being cruel, that family forgives. I asked if they'd forgiven Kyle for wasting their retirement, if they'd learned anything from enabling him his whole life. He didn't have an answer, just sat there looking defeated while Mom sobbed. I told them I'd make them an offer. One time, take it or leave it. I'd pay off Kyle's debts completely. Every dollar. But there were conditions. Kyle had to go to financial counseling, had to get a real job, had to sign a contract saying he'd never ask them for money again. And my parents had to admit in writing that they'd shown favoritism my entire life and that it was wrong. Then I found out the truth about just how bad Kyle's situation really was. He didn't just owe money to banks. He owed money to people who don't take you to court when you don't pay. People who show up at your house. People who threaten your family. Kyle had gotten involved with some loan sharks to fund his cryptocurrency scheme, and now they wanted their money plus interest. We weren't talking $50,000 anymore. We were talking $120,000 to make this go away. My parents were terrified. They'd already given Kyle everything they could, and it wasn't enough. The people he owed were getting impatient. Someone had vandalized their house. Mom's car had been keyed. These weren't idle threats. I met with Kyle directly. He was a mess. Scared, desperate, finally facing real consequences. I laid out the same deal. I'd pay his debts, all of them, but he had to change. Counseling, real job, no more schemes. And he had to admit to our parents that he'd wasted every opportunity they'd given him. Kyle agreed. He didn't have a choice. I paid off his debts that week, every single one. $120,000 that I could afford to lose because I'd built something real instead of waiting for handouts. The loan sharks disappeared. The threats stopped. Kyle started seeing a counselor. I couldn't believe what I was seeing when my parents tried to thank me. They thought this meant we were good now, that I'd forgiven them, and we could move forward as a family. I explained that paying Kyle's debts wasn't forgiveness. It was me stopping the immediate crisis so I could sleep at night. But our relationship had changed permanently. They'd shown me where I ranked in their priorities, and I'd adjusted my behavior accordingly. Mom asked what that meant practically. I said it meant polite distance. Holiday cards, but not holiday dinners. Phone calls on birthdays, but not weekly check-ins. I'd be their daughter on paper, but the closeness was gone. They traded my trust for Kyle's comfort, and these were the consequences. Dad said I was being unfair, that people make mistakes. I agreed. People do make mistakes. But this wasn't one mistake. This was 34 years of consistent choices that told me I mattered less. The inheritance was just the moment I stopped pretending it didn't hurt. Real quick, where are you watching from? Drop your country below. And honestly, would you have gone this far? Let me know. Now, here's where everything exploded even more. Kyle relapsed 6 months later. Not with drugs or alcohol, but with his old patterns. He lasted exactly half a year in his regular job before quitting to pursue another business opportunity. This time, a dropshipping scheme he'd learned about online. He asked our parents for seed money. They said no. He asked me. I said absolutely not.
He did it anyway.
Took out credit cards, small loans, convinced some friends to invest. 3 months later, it collapsed. He lost everything again, plus his friends' money. But this time, no one bailed him out. Our parents didn't have anything left to give. I'd made it clear I was done. His friends wanted nothing to do with him. Kyle had to declare bankruptcy. Lost his apartment. Moved back in with our parents at 38 years old. Had to take a minimum wage job just to have some income. This was rock bottom. The place he'd been headed his whole life, just delayed by years of family enabling. My parents blamed themselves. Mom said if they'd just given me the inheritance too, split it like they'd originally planned, maybe things would be different. I told her that was magical thinking. Kyle would have wasted his half either way. The only difference was I would have had less respect for them if they'd also given me money after a lifetime of favoritism. Dad asked if I'd ever forgive them. I said maybe eventually, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'd never forget how easily they dismissed my feelings at that Thanksgiving dinner. How they'd expected me to smile and support their decision to give everything to the son who never appreciated it. The family business they'd sold had new owners who'd done well with it. My parents sometimes talked about how if they'd just kept it longer, sold it for more, maybe they'd still have their retirement intact. I reminded them that the business wasn't the problem. Their choices after selling it were the problem. Plot twist, I found out years later that Kyle had actually asked them to give him my share. It wasn't entirely their idea. He'd convinced them he had a can't-miss investment opportunity, that he just needed more capital, that he'd pay everyone back with huge returns. They believed him, because they always believed him. That knowledge somehow made it worse. And that's how karma caught up with them. If this satisfied you, smash that like and subscribe for daily family revenge stories. Comment what you think they deserved. YouTube's recommending another crazy story next. Check it out. See you there. I still see my parents occasionally. Brief visits, surface-level conversations. They're living on Social Security now, modest apartment, careful budgets. Kyle's still with them, still struggling, still talking about his next big idea. And I'm still building my life, still investing, still proving that the daughter they overlooked was the one who actually had it figured out all along.